It is time to win a fantasy championship. Welcome to week 17. I am Adam Aizer here on Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary, and we're going to help you out. I got Dave Richard and Jamey Eisenberg joining me today. We're going to tell you who to start. It's week 17. Are you really starting Michael Carter against the Bengals or Tyler Shuck at Tennessee? Are we starting every Jaguar like Brenton Strange and Parker Washington? What are we going to do about Jared Goff? Do we go to the waiver wire if we have Jared Goff, who's facing Minnesota? I did my waiver claims for championship week. Guess what? Trevor Lawrence was available in both of my leagues. So make sure you look for Lawrence. Make sure you look for Ramondre Stevenson. Anybody who may have been dropped recently. It's going to be a busy day of waiver wiring for you. All right, let's bring in Dave Richard and Jamey Eisenberg now. We're going to talk running backs in a moment. We're also going to get our top 3 waiver wire priorities at any position. But Dave and Jamey, you're facing off in the championship round of the podcast league. Let's hear some trash talk. Dave, get him.
Jamey's team is really good. I know that Todd is the brains behind it. He shares his team, and I share my team too. That's what we do in the podcast league. And Todd is really the brains of the operation. So I shouldn't even call it Jamey's team. But Todd's going to be tough for us to beat in the podcast league final.
Ooh, chilling trash talk. Jamey, can you do any better than that?
No, Dave's going to kill us. So it's going to be, we're just happy to be here.
To be fair, it's not Dave's team, it's Andrew's team. And we've got some unbelievable luck also on our side and some good karma too. Andrew is going to be a first-time father this coming week. So he's going to have a newborn son, and we'll probably end up winning by a smidge over Todd's squad.
All right, that's great. Well, certainly, Jamey, I think you kind of have to tank now. Just don't ruin the week for Andrew. But yeah. Let's get to our top 3 waiver wire priorities at any position for week 17. Dave, I'll let you start.
So my list is different from Jamey's list, and I get where Jamey's coming from. He's got Michael Carter at the top of the list. I actually agree with it. If you want a surefire running back who's going to play, I'd rather take chances with some of my ad drops at the running back position. And running back wouldn't even be my first priority. I'd look to see what the DSTs are like and what my opponent's team looks like. Remember, there should be only 2 teams left to make ad and drops in every fantasy league at this point in the season. So the Chargers DST taking on Houston, that would be my top priority. And then after that, I would look to see if Emmanuel Wilson's available. What if he's the lead running back for Green Bay and Josh Jacobs doesn't play? And then what if Jawar Jordan is the lead running back for Houston and Woody Marks misses a second straight game? I'd like to have those 2 players on my fantasy roster ready to go along with the Chargers DST. But because there's uncertainty with both of their situations, you want to play it safe. I get that. Michael Carter would top the list. I do like his matchup against Cincinnati quite a bit.
Okay, Jamey, your top 3, Michael Carter, Tyler Shuck, Brenton Strange.
Yeah, and in the case of Carter, again, taking on the Bengals, that's a pretty easy situation to look at and say, okay, hopefully he continues to be the lead running back. He played much more than Amari DiMercado, much more than Kiner, and hopefully that's going to continue in a game where I think will be hopefully a back and forth type of affair where we're seeing Carter more involved in the passing game. Last week, only 2 targets, no catches. That's not typically what we get from Carter, or at least from the Cardinals' backfield. In the case of Tyler Shuck, he's just been fantastic getting this Titans defense, which we know has really struggled against opposing passing games, aside from the Kansas City situation last week where they were down to the 3rd-string quarterback. In the case of Brenton Strange, you just want pieces of this Jaguars offense at this point. So did not play well against the Colts the first time. I think we all saw what George Kittle did against this Colts secondary on Monday night. And I think Strange just walks in as a #1 fantasy tight end. So 4 of his last 5 games have been fantastic. I think he gets back on track this week as well. Keeps it going this week as well in that matchup against Indianapolis.
Okay, so remember to not just make claims for your team, but also to block your opponent. That might be the most important thing that you're doing this week. There's a player that your opponent needs. Make your first priority, an option to replace that player. Or you do you. I won't tell you what to do. I'm not going to bully you or anything, but make sure you keep in mind what your opponent needs. So running back is interesting this week. I mean, we've got some options. We just don't know the health of some of these backfields. But yeah, I'm going to ask you guys to do what we did this morning, which is not necessarily rank the players, but rank the backfields, just because we don't know if Josh Jacobs, how healthy he's going to be. We don't know the Texans status, the Browns, is Dylan Sampson going to play? So when we look at the Packers backfield, the Texans, the Browns, the Commanders, and the Cardinals, Jamey, how would you rank those situations this week?
The Packers would be one. If you tell me that Emmanuel Wilson is starting for Josh Jacobs against the Ravens, I would be all in on that, even if the quarterback situation is messy for Green Bay with Jordan Love potentially not playing, even Malik Willis now dealing with a shoulder injury, so just something to keep an eye on there. Number 2 is where it starts to get a little tricky, because I think if you say right now that Woody Marks is starting, that's a guy that I think that a lot of people have had some success with. You look at the Brown situation, and if you were to say that Dylan Sampson, based on his role in the passing game, would be starting, that's something you could look at and say, okay, I'd be excited about that. But for me, I'm going to go still with the Cardinals. Just looking at what we know with Michael Carter, he's had 3 games now with double digits in targets. 2 of those, he's been 12-plus PPR points. You're talking about the best matchup on the table. So I'm not going to overlook that and try and get crazy with it. So I'll go Packers 1. I'll go Cardinals 2. I'll go Texans 3. Am I missing one? Browns. I'll go Browns 4
Yep.
and Commanders 5. I just think the situation with the Commanders, they don't throw to their running backs. And if Quinnen Williams plays, I know they're still dealing with some other injuries there, but when Quinnen Williams has been on the field, the rushing production has been absolutely non-existent. The only team that's had success fantasy-wise is the Detroit Lions when Quinnen Williams has been healthy, and that's Jahmyr Gibbs scoring 3 touchdowns. David Montgomery's only running back to do well against him, and he broke off a big run. So I don't want to trust Chris Rodriguez falling into the end zone, because if he doesn't, he has 2 catches on the season. They're still going to play Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. Jeremy McNichols will get in as well. And we may be on their 3rd-string quarterback also if Josh Johnson's starting. So I would like to avoid the Commanders as much as I can.
You make a good argument for that with the Commanders versus the Browns. Neither one of them would be top 3 for me. I agree with you. The Packers situation is the best situation, but I'll disagree. I'll take the Texans 2nd, and I'll take the Cardinals 3rd. It's just easier to look at the Cardinals and know that we've got Michael Carter there. I just don't know if Michael Carter is that good. Last week, we thought that he would get a lot of catches, and that would help support a floor for him in fantasy. That didn't happen. And I know it's a great matchup against Cincinnati. I kind of think the Cardinals are what they are right now, and that's a team that's going to throw the ball a lot and not necessarily play with a big lead, especially this week, given the way that Bengals offense has been playing. So I would probably put the Texans 2nd, and then definitely put the Cardinals 3rd. And then I think you're probably right about the Browns situation. It's really a gross situation against the Steelers. Their offensive line's terrible. You make a great case. We don't know for sure if Quinnen Williams is going to come back. And we know for sure that the Commanders won't run right at Quinnen Williams 20 times a game. So it's close between those 2 crummy running back situations between Washington and Cleveland. I don't even want to rank them, Adam. They both stink.
Yeah, I mean, they both stink, but Sampson, because of the work in the passing game, Sampson had a big game in week 1. It was a hot waiver wire pickup, and then Quinshon Judkins is playing week 2. And Raheem Sanders scored in week 1 and had a lot of work last week. So one thing I'll just point out is that if you're comparing Michael Carter to Jawad Jordan, again, Carter, at least we know, is going to be the starting running back, but he had 50% of the running back carries. Jordan had more like 70% of the running back carries.
Yep.
Now, the catches I would expect to be pretty even. In fact, I'd probably, even though it was 5-0 Jordan last week, catches compared to Carter, I would probably guess Carter has more catches than Jordan, just based on the way those offenses have operated this season. But just some things to keep in mind.
I also think when you look at the 2 games, Bengals, Cardinals feels like we're going to get into the 50s. Chargers, Texans could be in the teens. Like, those are just 2 really good defenses where we're not going to get a lot of production. So you may get some catches there, but I think if you're chasing catches, the Browns might be the best way to go, because if it's not Sampson, Travion Williams had 4 catches last week, and that seems like that role is kind of locked in, especially with Judkins not being there. So while Raheem Sanders may be the lead rusher, the guy catching passes may be the one you want to target.
Well, that just makes you want to target them less.
Right.
Yep. You want someone who would hopefully do both. But I guess the follow-up, Jamey, is, all right, pick up these guys. We're going to start them. I'll tell you what, I would start them over Rico Dowdle at this point. I don't know, some other running backs you might consider.
Over Breece Hall.
Yeah, that makes sense. How many of these guys would crack your top 24?
None of them are in my top 24. I think you just look at it as it's a pretty good week for running backs. So they're just outside. Carter's the highest one. Just again, you know what you're getting from him. He's going to be the lead running back in a game that's, just very high scoring potential. And for the most part, when he's gotten these opportunities, he's been good. And the Cardinals' main running back for the majority of the season has been good. So I know last week was bad. We thought that they would do well, that he would do well against the Falcons. I'm going to go right back to almost all the Cardinals, because I just think that was a weird game against the Falcons. This Bengals defense has just really been, for the majority of the season, the best team to play when you're talking about opposing quarterback, opposing running back, opposing tight end. Just give me those matchups all the time.
Okay. Dave, we haven't talked about Tyjae Spears, Isaiah Pacheco, or Audric Estime.
Yeah, there's a good reason for that.
Yeah. That's about to say.
Spears is interesting, I guess, just because we know that he's, for lack of a better term, the 1B running back in Tennessee. He had a pretty good game last week. If we're talking about catches for running backs, we can't ignore him as well. But he's in that same range as literally every running back that we've talked about so far. These are number 3 guys. Jamey's right. The running back list this week is really, really good. You should be able to have 2 running backs on your team already. There weren't a ton of running back injuries in week 16. You should be good to go. But if you're struggling, streaming, maybe you've been bouncing around Texans running backs or the Cardinals running backs, that would be the situation that you would have to be in to go and consider some of these other running backs. But it's not like I see Tyjae Spears in what's a decent matchup against New Orleans and say, yeah, he's at the top of the list, must-start type of fantasy running back. None of these guys are must-starts.
I will say there is one. If Emmanuel Wilson is the starter for the Packers, he would be in the top 24.
Oh, yeah, I would agree with that, but we just don't know that for sure.
I don't know if he's the starter. That would imply that Jacobs is out, right? There's no way he's going to start.
That would have to be the situation, right?
Right. Jacobs has to be out. Okay, 2 more guys real quick. Where, Jamey, did you rank Ramondre Stevenson? And where would you rank him if Travion Henderson does clear concussion protocol and play? And then Blake Corum. You know, they could blow out the Falcons. Corum's been red hot. Doesn't catch the ball. He's kind of like a better version of Chris Rodriguez, I guess. But Ramondre and Blake Corum, how do you feel about them?
Ramondre right now is a borderline number 1 running back. I think I have him 13, so I just love the setup for him against the Jets. I know last week, again, the Saints running back did not have a great game, unless you want to say that Taysom Hill was the Saints running back. But typically what we've seen from them since Quinnen Williams has left the Jets, the 5 weeks prior to week 16, they were the number 1 team in most fantasy points allowed to opposing running backs, 14 touchdowns to the position. So there's a great opportunity here for Ramondre if he's the lead running back as we expect. And if you are desperate, don't overlook Dearness Johnson, because he's going to be the second guy up now, and that might be a situation where he gets a few additional carries. So in these desperate situations, 14-team league, 16-team league, we're talking about finals for 10 and 12-team leagues. You might be scraping the bottom of the barrel here if you're missing somebody due to injuries or a flex. Dearness Johnson might be somebody to consider. But in the case of Ramondre Stevenson, should be awesome if there is no Travion Henderson. If Henderson's there, he's almost in a similar range to Corum. So right now I have Corum at 30. Right now I have both, or 2 of the guys that we talked about ahead of Corum, and that would be Carter and Jawar Jordan. If, in fact, we get Emmanuel Wilson, starting that, obviously he'll move ahead of him as well. But Corum's another guy. I'd start him over Rico Dowdle. I would start him over Breece Hall. Both those guys, I think, are going to struggle. And I think Corum has another opportunity, like you said, to be a guy that's going to get 11 to 15 total touches and find an opportunity to score a touchdown.
Well, with injuries to Lamar Jackson and Jordan Love and et cetera, with tough matchups for Jared Goff and Justin Herbert, you might need someone at quarterback this week. So we will look at the waiver wire quarterback options when we come back on Fantasy Football Today. We are talking waiver wire quarterbacks here. Tyler Shuck's on a little bit of a roll. He's getting you about 19 points most weeks. He's not getting you more than 23 points, but hey, maybe that could change. And there's our list of waiver wire priorities. Jamey, how are we feeling about this list? Tyler Shuck, Marcus Mariota against Dallas, Kirk Cousins, Bryce Young, Cam Ward.
Feel great about Tyler Shuck. I would start him over Jared Goff this week. I'd start him over Justin Herbert this week, over Bo Nix this week, over Jackson Dart this week. I think there's just a great opportunity here given the matchup and the way that he's performed. And so, again, it's risky because it's Tyler Shuck. He only has really 1 great receiver. I think you could factor in Juwan Johnson as being a solid tight end here. So 2 good options in the passing game and really no run game to speak of against the Titans defense that for the majority of the season has been great for opposing quarterbacks. After him, it's a guessing game only because Marcus Mariota's health status is questionable at this point. If he was good to go, taking on the Cowboys, I know he hasn't played well lately, but only 2 quarterbacks all season have failed to go over 20 fantasy points against Dallas. I think you'd feel pretty comfortable about him in a desperate situation. The other 3 guys are really deep league options. Bryce Young, not an easy matchup against Seattle. They are going to be missing most likely 2 guys on defense. You're looking at Kirk Cousins, has been great against 2 very easy opponents the last 2 weeks. Now step up in competition against the Rams, although they've been very bad in their secondary. And then for Cam Ward, he's got 2 touchdowns in each of his last 3 games. His last 2 games, he's been 19 fantasy points or more. and an okay matchup against New Orleans. They've actually done a great job against opposing quarterbacks, but he is playing better. So when you're talking about trying to find desperate options, I think the latter three certainly apply. Mariota, if he's healthy, would be a borderline number 1 quarterback, and Tyler Shuck is definitely in the number 1 quarterback conversation because, like you said, 4 straight games of 19 or more fantasy points, 5 of his last 6, he's been over that number, and we're seeing him just starting to get more comfortable and a great matchup against Tennessee.
Well then, Jamey, I think we should play a little Who Has More, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Because it is time for America's 4th favorite fantasy football related game show. It is time for Who Has More. Ladies and gentlemen, who has more in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues? Who has more 20-point fantasy games this season? Lamar Jackson or Tyler Shuck?
Oh boy.
I love how we both took a big breath there right before we answered this question. I think it's a tie. I think they both have 5.
I'm going to say Lamar.
Jamey is right. It is Lamar 5-4. It's pretty good, Dave. Pretty good. Yeah.
Too many of those 19-point games for Shuck blended in my mind for him to have gotten to 5.
Well, Lamar Jackson had 3 30-point games to start the season. He's been over 20 points twice since. Who has more touchdown passes this year, Michael Penix Jr. or Kirk Cousins?
Oh, wow.
Cousins.
I'm going to say Cousins as well.
Penix by 1, 9-8. Cousins has more multi-touchdown games than Penix, I think 3-2. And then I put a Twitter poll up just before the show. Who would you rather start, Jared Goff at Minnesota or Tyler Shuck at Tennessee? Who has more votes, Jared Goff at Minnesota or Tyler Shuck at Tennessee? Who do you think?
Chuck.
Goff.
Goff is up 55 to 45%. Jamey already said he'd start Shuck over him. Dave, how about you?
No, I'd go with Goff. I know that last week the Vikings defense got a gimme last week against the Giants. When you think about their game plan, their offensive line falling apart, really was a mess. Last time we saw Jared Goff go up against Minnesota, the Vikings defense was healthier, and Goff was able to get 23 fantasy points. That's higher than what Shuck has delivered, I think, in every game so far this year. I like Shuck. I'm starting Shuck in one of my championship games myself, but I think he's one of those high floor, low ceiling fantasy quarterbacks. Great matchup. Jamey said it all. It's all true. I'd rather take my chances on Jared Goff being just a little bit better. Goff isn't going to do what he did last week. He had an amazing 4th quarter, finishes like a top 5 quarterback. That's not happening. That's out of the question. But I think he can still be just a little bit better. That's the quarterback I would pick.
I guess the Vikings got a gimme against Dak, a gimme against Caleb Williams.
No, they were healthier then. They were healthier then.
A gimme against Lamar Jackson. A gimme. It's been
and they gave against Jared Goff.
7 straight weeks against some pretty solid competition where they've allowed 1 passing touchdown to opposing quarterbacks. I don't want to trust Jared Goff in this matchup.
I think it's the toughest decision, arguably, of the week. And you know what? It's even tougher, I think, for Jameson Williams. We talked about this on a different show, but you could just pivot to a different quarterback much more easily than you can pivot to a different wide receiver. So he's going to be a tough call as well. All right. So look, quarterback this week, obviously no teams on a bye, but there are a lot of injuries. So the options are Shuck, Mariota, Kirk Cousins, Bryce Young, and Cam Ward. And you know what? Last week we had similar names. And Shuck and Cousins and Young, they came. We didn't really start Ward, but if we had, they came through. They came through with decent games.
And McCarthy might have also.
Yeah, McCarthy. McCarthy, it's never pretty, but he runs. He's got, I don't know, four rushing touchdowns or something this year. He had one last week. So if he ends up playing against Detroit on Thursday, which we're not expecting right now, then maybe we'll reconsider.
Maybe the better quarterback in his own game.
Oh man. Oh, man.
And I don't know if I can disagree with that. I really like the way that McCarthy was. I didn't like the way he really played against the Giants, but I like the way that he was playing going into the game last week.
All right, so those are your quarterbacks. How about wide receivers? When we come back on Fantasy Football Today, we'll tell you which pass catchers to pick up off the waiver wire and who to start. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. This is Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary. And we are on to wide receivers on the waiver wire for Week 17. Every week, Dave, we pretty much get a few guys that could be good, but we're always nervous. They could also be really terrible. Is that what week 17 looks like to you?
Yeah, I don't see anybody that's a must start at wide receiver. Maybe a couple of guys that can be number 3 receivers in full PPR, and a bunch of receivers that I wish we had started last week.
Like who?
Well, Parker Washington is at the top of the list, and Jamey said it with Brenton Strange. He's a player on a team that you want pieces of, and the matchup is great, and the opportunity is great. I worry about Parker Washington, having good games in consecutive weeks. The only time he's done it this year is when the receiving core for Jacksonville was decimated. And I also worry about him when the matchup is favorable for other wide receivers in Jacksonville. And this Colts matchup, it's going to be good for everybody. So everybody can eat there. I don't know if Parker Washington can do a lot. Safe floor. Can he get us 5 for 50? 5 for 50? That's 10 PPR points. That's not bad. But I don't know if he can deliver anything close to what he did last week when Trevor Lawrence had to get the ball out fast against Denver.
Going into last night's game, the Colts had allowed 11.5 or more PPR fantasy points to 7 wide receivers in their last 3 games. I know Juwan Jennings got that. I don't know if Demarcus Robinson did as well. But this defense just stinks. So, Jamey, I think that's part of your excitement for Parker Washington. I think you said you'd start him over Brian Thomas Jr. this week?
I mean, he just had a better season, and Trevor Lawrence seems to favor him a little bit more. Brian Thomas certainly has more upside, as we've seen throughout the course of his 2-year career, and starting to come along alive lately prior to last week when he had to face Patrick Surtain. So they're basically back-to-back. I have, I believe, Washington at 35 and Thomas at 37. But even in the last 4 weeks, one of those games Parker Washington missed, he's been over 18 PPR points twice. So he's having a better season. He's been better recently. And Trevor Lawrence and certainly Liam Cohen, they seem to like Parker Washington a lot. And so I don't think it's a slam dunk either way. I can make a case for and against both of these guys. But I just think coming off the game that he just had, and look, a lot of it was missed tackles by Riley Moss, but still, it's hard to overlook 10 targets. As Dave said, it was getting the ball out quick. It was staying away from Brian Thomas. That's a big part of this as well. Also factoring into Brenton Strange. But I think you just look at the secondary, there's opportunities for all these guys. Really, Jacoby Myers is locked in as the 1. And then I think you can make a case for either of the other 2 guys to be the 2 if you want to throw Strange in there, 2, 3, and 4. So Trevor Lawrence is going to feed a couple of these guys. Whoever gets the opportunity to get the most targets and probably find the end zone is the one you want to gravitate toward. I'm just going to ride the hot hand right now and say that Washington is the second best receiving option in this Jaguars passing game.
Okay, let's talk about the other guys. Dave, Mac Hollins with an opportunity against the Jets, who he played well against earlier this year without Kayshon Boutte. I think it's pretty much mostly contingent on Boutte not playing. Not that Hollins hasn't had some numbers with Kayshon playing, but with him out, we're talking about a guy who runs almost all of the routes. Also, Demario Douglas is banged up. So kind of a sneaky play here. Could you imagine starting Mac Hollins in your fantasy championship? I don't know. I think you could do worse, personally. What do you think?
I think you could do worse, but I think you could also do better, and I think you can make the case that Parker Washington, as an example, is someone who would be a little bit better and maybe just a little bit safer because the floor for Mac Hollins is pretty low. We've seen plenty of single-digit PPR games from him this year, but in the 2 games without Kayshon Boutte earlier this year, one of them against the Jets, like you mentioned, 10.4 PPR points or more. I just wish I could say that that's the floor, but it's not. That feels more like the floor for Parker Washington. I don't even think Mac Hollins would be the second name that I would go after off the waiver wire. Jamey made a really good case for Luther Burden to be the second name that you go after. And we don't even know if Luther Burden's going to play, but the potential of him against San Francisco, the way that 49ers defense has looked really for like the last month and change, that's a really good opportunity. And so just to have that guy waiting on the bench to go in, and you can see we don't have him ranked. There's a reason for it. He hasn't been practicing. But if he does practice come Wednesday, come Thursday, you're going to want to have that guy potentially available to be a flex for your team in PPR. He was playing great before he got hurt.
And I think you want pieces of that San Francisco Chicago game. Could be a good one. Should be good weather at least, unless it's raining or something like that. But it's in San Francisco. Who else from this list? We got Parker Washington, Mac Hollins, Luther Burden. Jamey, you have Josh Downs. Is that only if Phillip Rivers is playing? And then you got Shamari Dike as well.
Downs is definitely dependent on Rivers. I think you can still make a case that he should be in the 3 receiver league conversation, but with the way Alec Pierce has been going, Michael Pittman, clearly depending on who the quarterback is, Tyler Warren becomes more attractive as well. But you look in the 2 games for Josh Downs with Phillip Rivers, 14 targets, scored a touchdown, was really involved in the game against San Francisco. And looking at this matchup against Jacksonville, they may be down one of their corners in Jordan Lewis, dealing with a foot injury. So that's certainly an opportunity for all of these guys. But at this point, we got to see if it's going to be Rivers, it's going to be Riley Leonard, could be Anthony Richardson if his eye situation is fine, and they want to give him a couple of weeks to see if how he looks going into the offseason. So keep an eye on the quarterback situation there. Jalen Coker, I know we kind of thought that he would be in this kind of range last week, taking on Tampa Bay. Great matchup as well. Did not deliver, but prior to 2 weeks was certainly starting to become a little bit more of a factor for the Panthers. 14 PPR pointing to the 2 previous games. So I think they're going to be throwing more than running against Seattle, just based on how the defense is for Seattle and the run game right now, the way it looks for Carolina. So I don't mind Coker as sort of a guy in this mix as well. And then for Chimere Dike, you remember how he had the Kamani Vidal every other game? Well, Dike has scored a touchdown every other game. So coming off a game where he scored 3 of his last 5, he's found the end zone. Could be one of these games where he just doesn't find a way to get into, score a touchdown. But this is not an easy matchup. The Saints have been really good against opposing wide receivers, top 10 in terms of fewest fantasy points allowed. But the way Cam Ward is playing right now, I think somebody will get to if he gets his 2 touchdowns, Dike is the easiest one to sort of, pin it on as saying that's the guy that he'll lean on, especially in the red zone. So I don't mind Dike as a low-end number 3 receiver.
Just one thing, a little off subject, but if you have the Saints DST, there's a good chance you made your championship. They were amazing last week. Cam Ward has thrown 1 pick in his last 8 games. So, and they've been on paper, this great matchup for these DSTs, and then these DSTs keep letting us down. So if you have the Saints, I don't know, you might want to pivot to somebody else. Dave, the Steelers will be without DK Metcalf for 2 weeks. Is there anyone in that passing game that you'd be looking at as a waiver wire pickup?
No, Kenny Gainwell, but I think he's already been picked up in so many leagues. But we've been talking about him as the de facto number 1 wide receiver anyway for the Pittsburgh Steelers. There are going to be a bunch of names, and we heard Mike Tomlin on Tuesday say that Roman Wilson will be given an opportunity. That's a player whose talent I really liked when he was coming out of Michigan, but there's no way I can trust him. There's no way I can really trust anybody in this passing game because Aaron Rodgers likes to spread the ball around. And I happen to think that they're going to be able to run the ball as much as they want to against Cleveland. Their run defense, the Browns' run defense, has really fallen off, and the game script should be very favorable for Pittsburgh to do a lot of handing off. So no, there isn't somebody. And I wouldn't be a big fan of DK Metcalf this week anyway in fantasy if he weren't suspended. So to me, it's all about Jaylen Warren, Kenny Gainwell, and that is the order this week. It wasn't that order the past 2 weeks, but it is the order for me this week, followed by nobody else in the Steelers passing game.
Okay. I guess I'm starting both Steelers running backs in our FFT championship league. Woo! Oh, great.
And you should be excited. I think both of them have.
No, I'm going to get destroyed. Absolutely destroyed. I mean, what a garbage team I have. But anyway, last thing on wide receivers. Did you see what Juwan Jennings did? Juwan Jennings has been in the headlines a little bit. Gets under the skin of opponents. Did you see the fake out when he scored the touchdown?
No.
He goes over to the stands. He gives the ball. He's about to give the ball to a fan in the front row, and he takes it right away. It was so mean. Juwan Jennings, you got to be better than that. It's Christmas. It's holiday season. You couldn't have given her the ball. It was so rude. Juwan Jennings, I just wanted to break that up. I didn't like it at all, guys. I didn't like it. All right, I do like the tight ends on the waiver wire, though, and we'll talk about them when we come back. They would never do something like that. You think Juwan Johnson would have done that? No way. We'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today. Welcome back. Okay, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and coin it. TM. It's been the year of the waiver wire tight end. No one else is allowed to say that. That is mine. But it really has every single week. It seems like we have good tight ends on the waiver wire. And, some of them have been picked up. But, hey, man, I'm in a league where Harold Fannin Jr. was available because you get to this point, these guys have been dropped recently. He's a little bit of a stretch. But there are a lot of guys who might be rostered in 80, 85% of leagues.
Dude, you're in a league where Harold Fannin's available and 2 leagues where Trevor Lawrence is available?
Yeah. Dude, our FFT league, because Trevor Lawrence, I'll tell you why, because they both had brutal matchups last week. So they have been dropped in some leagues, and you don't pick them up if you're not starting them. There's no point in stashing at this point. So now, bam, Patriots DST is on the waiver wire. Bam, Trevor Lawrence is on the waiver wire. Harold Fannin Jr. might be on the waiver wire. Just take a look. But anyway, we still have, Hunter Henry, and we have Juwan Johnson, and we have Colson Loveland, and Other guys that are rostered in, one big one, Dalton Schultz, available in some leagues, but we won't talk too much about them right now. We're going to focus on Brenton Strange. He's our top waiver wire priority, Jamey. And what kind of week are you expecting from Strange against the Colts?
I think a relatively good one. You know, you look at what his body of work has been since coming back from the hip injury. He's been 4 or 5 games over 11 PPR points, and I think he could be in that range again. You know, you're looking at a matchup against the Colts. He struggled, but he still had 6 targets in that game, and that was the game where both Colts quarterbacks where Daniel Jones got hurt, so they played both quarterbacks. So we'll see if the Colts are competitive, and then we get maybe a little bit more of Trevor Lawrence throwing. That's kind of been the issue, is he going to throw the ball enough? But I still think you just look at what he's been able to accomplish, what we just saw George Kittle do against this defense. I think there's a great opportunity for Strange. I don't know if he's got top 5 upside, so I'm not starting him over Kyle Pitts. I think the other guys that you mentioned, Juwan Johnson, Dalton Schultz, Hunter Henry, all in a better spot than him. But when you start to compare him to Dallas Goedert, who's got a tough matchup against Buffalo, when you talk about Travis Kelce and now the quarterback situation there, Dalton Kincaid, some of these other guys that have been struggling recently, I think you just trust Brenton Strange and what he's done, what Trevor Lawrence is doing right now, and the matchup I think is fairly easy. So hopefully he comes through with another strong performance.
Yeah, so you mentioned, who'd you mention? Dallas Goedert, he's tight end 7 this year, tight end 6 per game this year. Travis Kelce is tight end 9 per game this year. Tyler Warren has fallen all the way to tight end 12 per game this year. And I could see a lot of people trying to get away from them. Dave, Darren Waller's tight end 6. I don't think we can really trust him right now.
No.
So,
and that's one guy that's easy to bench for Brenton Strange. But I do, just like I worry a little bit about Parker Washington and how much work he can actually get, I think the same thing for Brenton Strange. I do like that he's had this great run of double-digit PPR points. A lot easier to gravitate those types of players when they're tight ends than they are wide receivers. But I don't think he carries a ton of upside. I think that this is going to be a game where Jacksonville, yes, they're going to be able to do whatever they want. I just don't know how much volume there will be, because I don't know if the Colts are going to necessarily push them into a high-scoring shootout type of game. That would be beneficial for everybody. And I think it's a bounce-back opportunity for Jacoby Myers and Brian Thomas, more so than it is for a chance for the numbers to keep flowing for Washington and Brenton Strange. So low-end starting tight end, I'm good with it. Top 10 type of fantasy tight end, maybe top 8, I think I would take a big step back.
Taysom Hill is super interesting as a tight end. You look at the matchup for Taysom Hill. I think you almost have to look at what a running back's matchup would be.
Yep.
Not almost. I think you do. And it's brutal. It's brutal. Tennessee's run defense has been terrific lately. But Jamey, could you see yourself starting Taysom Hill this week?
Absolutely. I think you look at, this is the first game that we saw without Kamara, without Kendre Miller, without Devin Neal, and they said this is going to be our best running back. And that's kind of been our fear when Miller first got hurt. It was our fear when Neal took over, and then when Neal got hurt. And so looking at Estime and looking at Evan Hull, they may just say, okay, this is going to be our guy. You also look at this receiving core. After losing Vele, he had 5 targets and 4 catches. There's also the gimmick of potentially him throwing the ball, as we saw with a 58-yard touchdown pass. And you could all clearly say that was his last game in New Orleans if he's going to leave the Saints this offseason. He's still playing with them for 2 more games, so they may still give him the opportunity to go out there and have opportunities as well. So there is a lot of risk involved, because prior to last week's game, he had not been doing those things. But again, first game with the backfield completely decimated. I think we'll still see him involved. Still has always those chances to get those goal line touches. Still has a chance to throw the ball a couple of times. And again, his work in the passing game is really kind of the thing that went underrated a little bit, because the 12 carries, okay, he'll probably get 6 or 7. Will he get double digits in carries again? Probably depends on the game flow. I'm going to guess that they have an opportunity to win this game against Tennessee based on how they've been playing. So I like the opportunity for Taysom Hill, but I understand the risk that's involved with him, because prior to last week's game, we just had not seen him do this under Kellen Moore's tenure.
Let me ask you guys about Colby Parkinson. All of the things that were true last week are true this week. He's been so involved in the red zone. Devontae Adams, we don't think as of now is going to play, but he might. The difference would be last week he had this great matchup against Seattle, and doesn't have that same matchup this week. He gets Atlanta, and they're pretty good against tight ends. They just held Trey McBride in check, but they did give up big game to Elijah Higgins. But if you went to Parkinson last week, Dave, are you dropping him this week?
Yes, with lots of spite and anger. I dropped Colby Parkinson, and you mentioned it. Atlanta's been great at covering tight ends. Safety Jesse Bates has been a part of that. Their linebackers have been a part of that. And the fact that Trey McBride, listen, McBride, even if he had caught the touchdown that he should have got from Jacoby Brissett. Not that I'm bitter. He wouldn't have had his huge games like we're used to seeing him have. So I would be very nervous to start any of the Rams tight ends. I don't think that's really anything crazy. Brenton Strange over Colby Parkinson. The only thing that I would add is it is so fantasy football for a guy that everybody was excited about to deliver a dud, and then the very next week he comes through and has a big game. And if it happens this week, we can call it a Parkinson from here on out. We had ourselves a Parkinson. The guy was terrible when we needed him, and then when no one was looking, he scored 4 touchdowns and had 120 yards. I don't think he's doing that, but even if he catches 1 touchdown, that would make us all a little frustrated.
No, but I still think of the waiver wire tight ends, he's probably ranks up there in terms of likelihood to catch a touchdown. He could always do that. But I had him in a couple leagues. I'm out in 3 leagues. I'm out in 2 of them, and I'm dropping him in the other one. And yeah, it is a spite drop for sure. Okay, so the shallow league guys, Jamey, good options. Who do you like best? Hunter Henry at the Jets, Dalton Schultz at the Chargers, who've been bad in 3 of their last 4 games against tight ends, really bad. Juwan Johnson at Tennessee or Colston Loveland at San Francisco?
Yeah, it's Juwan Johnson. First game without Devon Vele, targets were up, catches were up. He was a dominant player in a game where Tyler Shough threw the ball a lot. So just something to keep in mind there. But I think that's going to be, a game. This is going to be a game where Tyler Shough's going to carry the offense as well, just based on the rushing attack for New Orleans. So for the majority of the season, he's been kind of hovering around that 10 to 12 range. And then now you see the spike in targets and the spike in production as well. So given the fact that Vele is on IR, I don't think the receiving core is great. You got to just buy into what Juwan Johnson did. But Dalton Schultz not far behind him. 6 of his last 8 games, he's been 11.1 PPR points or more. And then Hunter Henry also, for the last 3 of his last 4 games, the Buffalo game notwithstanding, he's been 11 PPR points or more as well. So you see the way right now that this offense is operating. We talked about this with Mac Hollins. Potentially down Kayshon Boutte, potentially down DeMario Douglas. There are guys missing in this offense, so that should be a spike in targets for Hunter Henry as well. So I think all of these guys have an opportunity to throw Colston Loveland's name in there also. If there's no Odunze, no Luther Burden, we didn't get the game that we were hoping for in that matchup last week against Green Bay. But as you alluded to, better weather, at least that's the expectation, taking on San Francisco. I think their defense clearly struggled a little bit, certainly compared to Green Bay's. So there's an opportunity for Loveland to have another good game as well. So he's behind the other 3, but I love the setup for Johnson, love the setup for Schultz, and certainly love the setup for Hunter Henry as well.
Dave, I think we've exhausted tight ends a little bit here, so why don't we spend a few minutes on DSTs?
Sure.
And I think you said at the top of the show that the Chargers DST, was that it? That would maybe your top priority?
They've been very good. 10 or more fantasy points, and this isn't a typical scoring league. I know DST scoring really varies from league to league, but 10 or more in 7 of their past 10 games, 15 in 3 of their past 4. It didn't happen against Dallas. Dallas put up a lot of points. 2 weeks ago, I was so encouraged by the Texans' offense and what they were capable of doing. And then last week, they took on the Raiders, and it turned into a dogfight. And honestly, the offense did not look as good. So there aren't a lot of DSTs that I feel good about. I don't know if I could even find 10 that I feel good about. But the Chargers make the cut. They're one of the 10 best DSTs that you could start this week.
Jamey, who are some of the waiver wire DSTs other than the Chargers that you might look at?
I think you take a chance on the Lions just in the case that Max Brosmer plays. We saw what that looked like the last time he was under center. It was against Seattle, and the Lions defense very beat up right now, but opportunity to take advantage of one of the worst quarterback performances that we've seen this season. And the same with the Giants. I know their defense has not played well the majority of the year, but neither has Geno Smith. And so you're looking at that offensive line for the Raiders. I know they definitely played better against Houston, but again, body of work is something that you've got to take into account. I'll also take a look at the Vikings. I know the Lions offense is amazing, but Brian Flores is going to throw a lot of things at Jared Goff that he may not be ready for, especially what we've seen from him against opposing quarterbacks the majority of the second half of the season. So you're looking at defenses that are playing well or matchups that are in your favor, and I think the Giants have a great matchup, and the Vikings defense has just been fantastic. So that could be more of a situation like as Dave is talking to in terms of what your defensive scoring is. In terms of points allowed, I don't think the Lions will score a lot against Minnesota, and certainly will be the case for the Giants as well. I don't think we see a high-scoring game between the Giants and the Raiders.
Yeah, if you're a Vikings believer, then you're going to love this stat, because I told you about what the Chargers have been doing, 7 of the last 10 games, 10 fantasy points or more. Vikings, 16 or more fantasy points in 3 of their past 4 games. You look at who they've played. It was the Giants, it was the Commanders, it was Seattle. It's not offenses like Detroit, but like I said, if you're believing in the Vikings and what they do, this is a DST that could probably make a top 12 list.
Okay, and keep an eye on the Ravens, too. We're going to see what the quarterback situation is for Baltimore, but the Ravens might be someone you pivot to later in the week. They're 54% rostered. And we're going to take one more break, and our favorite segment, when we come back, we answer your questions on Fantasy Football Today, see what's on your mind going into Week 17. We'll be right back. One last time before the fantasy regular season, well, fantasy playoffs rather end, although some of you will be in week 18 and we'll help you out there as well. But your questions, Ashton Genty or Michael Carter? Ooh, the silver anniversary championship. Very cool. You're going to win it with Genty?
It's got to be Genty. I mean, he looked awesome last week. That was the guy we were hoping to see all season, and a great matchup against the Giants. He's top 10 running back this week.
All right. Next up. Oh, yeah. I did a poll on this very question. Who would you start, Trevor Lawrence or Josh Allen? And Trevor Lawrence is winning 56% of the vote right now to 44% for Josh Allen. What say you guys?
I agree with the poll. I think Lawrence is slightly better than Josh Allen. I don't like that Josh Allen has a foot issue that could limit his rushing ability. That's half the reason why we love him. We certainly can't start him hoping for him to throw for 300 yards and multiple touchdowns against Philadelphia. That's a tough matchup. Give me Trevor Lawrence against the Colts.
Yeah, I have Lawrence 5 and Josh Allen 6.
Yeah, Allen a little bit lower than usual in the rankings. Stephon Diggs. Did you guys see what Stephon Diggs said? Prime time, my time, I think he said. He loves being in prime time. Well, he isn't in prime time this week. So Brian Thomas Jr. or Stephon Diggs?
It's got to be Diggs. I mean, he's also 4 catches away for another incentive, so he's at 76 catches, needs 80 to get to another bonus, whatever the case may be. I mean, hopefully Brian Thomas does well, but I think you just, again, Diggs coming off the game that he had, maybe down 2 wide receivers for the Patriots. Like, to me, it's easy.
That's the issue for me, is that there isn't Kayshon Boutte, there isn't Demario Douglas. Those are 2 guys that take away certain types of targets from Stephon Diggs. It's just a matter of how much will he actually play in the game. He is taking on the Jets. I actually have Brian Thomas Jr. ranked 1 spot higher than Stephon Diggs this week.
All right. Next up, pick 2 for flexes. Diggs, Jaylen Warren, Marvin Harrison Jr.
Are we sure it's Jaylen Warren or is it Tyler Warren?
Well, if it's Tyler, we're sitting Tyler Warren.
Yeah, and we're starting Jaylen Warren against Cleveland. I would flex him and still Diggs over Marvin Harrison.
Diggs is my favorite player of this group. I would go Diggs and either Warren over Marvin.
Oh, either one. Okay. Yeah, Marvin Harrison, we're treating Michael Wilson like he's the top guy, right, at this point?
I think you have to. Another guy, again, chasing a milestone. First 1,000-yard season for Michael Wilson's on the table.
That's incredible.
I'm going to guess they're going to try and get it for him.
Yep.
Hey, guys, I know we're supposed to answer these questions, and we will, but it actually relates to this. Woody Marks is back at practice for the Texans. So
there goes Jawar Jordan.
Yep.
I think you go with Troy Franklin, just with Pat Bryant not expected to play.
Yep, most upside of the 3.
Next, please.
Ooh.
What does that mean? There's okay, so I'm
Just
facing
you.
Jack. What's the pot, Jamey? What's the split?
There's a prize for first and second place. He's wanting to make it winner take all instead of a first and second place situation.
Jack, my friend, this is the worst team that I've ever had in the finals. And I've lost Travion Henderson, and I have Tyler Warren and Colby Parkinson at tight end. I will absolutely not make this bet with you. However, I would love to split the pot before it even starts. If you're interested in that, call me. Next up, Michael Carter or Michael Wilson?
Michael, yes.
Definitely got to go with Mike. I'd go with the receiving Mike.
All right, thanks so much, everybody. We appreciate it. This is Fantasy Football Today. It's been a fun ride getting to this point. Now let's finish it up, finish it the right way. If you enjoyed the show, please check out our Fantasy Football Today podcast. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, we have, 8 episodes a week, Monday through Friday, and then a Saturday and a Sunday night. We got some YouTube-only stuff. So check out youtube.com/fantasyfootballtoday for the YouTube exclusive content, or just to watch the podcast. Big thanks to Dave Richard and Jamey Eisenberg. Bigger thanks to all of you at home for watching and listening and being with us throughout the entire season. Happy holidays to everybody out there. I'm Adam Aizer, wishing you good luck in Week 17. Let's go win a fantasy championship on Fantasy Football Today.